Good evening, everybody. It is Sunday, January the 8th, and although we're a little bit late on this one, better late than never. I'm your wealth guy. Let's talk money. Let's talk market preview and predictions for 2023. All right, everybody. So first things first, welcome back to the channel. I really hope you like today's content. Now, we have for a little while stopped doing some of these long videos. However, with the way the markets are probably going to look this year, I think it's more important that we bring some of the long videos in addition to the morning shorts and daily market previews. But this one in particular is actually my annual tradition of doing my market predictions and calls for the year. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is exactly what happened last year. So last year on the annual preview, we made a few calls, and some of the things we talked about were volatility. We said we're going to get a very significant increase in volatility, which we did, and that carried on right through the entire year. In fact, it's carrying over into this year, and I don't think we're done with that yet, but we'll talk about 2023 in a moment. I also said that we're probably going to see a very significant commodities run, which we did get. At one point, we saw certain commodities such as lumber go absolutely out of control before they pulled way back. Same thing with precious metals. Gold, silver ran up unbelievably high before pulling back again a little bit. And now we're starting to see that happen again, which we'll talk about as well. I did talk about cryptocurrencies and my lack of confidence in cryptocurrencies, and I said that probably 2022 will be a difficult year, and we saw that it is. It finished the year relatively low at 17,000, somewhere in that range, and we're continuing to see crypto, especially Bitcoin, struggle a little bit here in the early part of the year. Now, we also talked about the economy and how the economy is actually going to get significantly worse. We started seeing very, very noticeable trends as far back as August in 2021, and that trend did continue. And in fact, 2022 was a very significant year as far as economic downturn, and I think we're going to see significantly more of that in 2023, which we'll talk about as well. We also talked about interest rates and what it could mean, how it's going to impact the markets, and money printing by the Fed, which although is off-book money printing, it's still there, and we can talk about that in terms of debt market manipulation. And not even manipulation, we'll just say debt market movements and price action. But what are my calls for this year? Because I really don't want this video to be overly long, because we're still going to do a weekly market preview and catch up. So let's talk about this year. So for 2023, here are some of the things I'm looking at. I'm saying volatility will absolutely continue. Please excuse me, I do have my notes here. So 2023 will see continued volatility in the markets. We've already seen very significant volatility this week as the first trading week of the year has gone by and closed, and we're going to get ready to start second week tomorrow morning. So again, volatility, major thing we're going to experience this year. Rates are going to continue to increase, especially for the short term. I think central banks aren't done raising yet. Now, does that mean we're going to see an absolute pivot? Probably at some point. Keep in mind, if we're talking about specifically in the U.S., Fed Chair Powell has already stated that the economy can handle more pain, meaning they're going to continue to keep rates increasing. Especially after last week's job numbers, we saw that the economy can handle more pain as more jobs are expected to be lost. And in fact, Powell has also stated that they anticipate a very significant amount of jobs to be lost moving forward. Now, recession will be a big one this year. That is going to be a very hot topic. I do think we're going to continue to hear a lot of that, not just in the US and Canada, but in fact globally. Even as China begins to open up, I think we're still going to see a lot of that down pressure on all global economies, including North American. Now, money printing by central banks will be very significant this year. It'll be off book, and that includes if we see the Federal Reserve stop rates. Now, even though we may not see that in the first quarter of the year, that doesn't mean they're not printing additional money off book. In fact, every time you hear funding for certain crises, shall we say, and you know that that money has to come from somewhere, and it's not coming from the general tax revenues. It is actually coming from additional money being printed by the Fed. Again, off book. Now, if we take a look at commodities, commodities will be a very big one this year, especially when I talk about key buzzwords later on. But I do believe that precious metals, which are already seeing some significant movement to the upside for both gold and silver, I think we are going to see more of that this year. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen without some significant, again, volatility. Keep in mind, volatility will play a very significant factor. Again, I just want to emphasize that throughout the entire year. But part of the reason why I think gold and silver is going to see some significant movements to the upside is because of the BRIC nations as they continue to expand and drop the US dollar as part of their currency for crude or exchange for crude. I think the US dollar will start to see some pressure, and typically, or often enough, when the US dollar does drop, that's usually a positive sign for gold. So we're going to keep an eye there as well throughout the year. Now, not only that, there are certain black swan events that could potentially happen, and that includes Russia with the capping of crude at $60. We could very well see Russia again transition into a gold for payment method. And if they do that, that'll put additional pressure on the US dollar and absolutely help gold, especially gold, but also potentially silver, since it rides the tail all the way up, very significant, potentially new highs. Now, if we take a look further, some of the other areas we're going to hear a lot of in the markets that could manipulate the markets or move markets, the climate initiative is going to increase. Or the climate narrative is going to increase. We are going to hear a lot more about climate change, carbon tax, especially here in Canada. As you know, we are still, although we've already seen one increase, we still have several more throughout the year, which is going to very significantly impact Canadian households. Now, as the economy and the market continue to change and fall to the downside, what we are going to see is more pressure on commodities here. Again, because of this climate initiative, if they have any chance of achieving those, they are going to need more metals and more commodities to come out of the earth. And that is going to help metal prices move to the upside as well. Now, one other area I want to talk about here is China becoming a big player again this year in resources. Part of that is because they actually hold a very significant amount of existing resources now. In many cases, for example, I believe it's copper. Copper is somewhere around 70% of all global resources are held by the Chinese. So I do believe that that's going to play a major factor as well as far as pricing is concerned for precious metals this year. Now, if we do get a pivot, let's backtrack here a little bit to the Fed. If we do see a pivot in a way by the central bank to try to support the economy, in fact, what we'll see is a short pop probably in the markets. People will start to pour money back in, but this will only be a trap, as I do believe that any aggressive move to the upside will fall back twice as hard in this case because the economy still isn't improving. So regardless of what the Fed does, and even though there's a disconnect there, we do want to keep an eye on what's going on both sides of that spectrum. Now, inflation, again, is going to be a major factor this year. If people think inflation is going away, I am terribly sorry. That will not be the case. I think inflation will be here, not just for the rest of the year, but for many years to come. So anticipate that that's always going to be there. Other buzzwords, as we're getting close to that 10-minute mark, I really don't want to go too much longer than that. Some of my buzzwords this year. So inflation, volatility, jobless, recession, shortages, currency crisis, variance, a reset, and climate initiative. All right, everybody, comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say on this one. These are my calls for this year and what the major areas I'd like to take a look at as the markets continue to move. But I will see you still every single morning for my market shorts, just a preview before the market starts, and every weekend a long video will be back on the scene. All right, everybody, I will see you tomorrow morning at the opening bell.